left and right have never had very clear definitions that are based on differences in political philosophy. The differences seem to be what each side counts itself as at a given time, and it's a very dynamic definition, especially for the right. I think the left is kind of more. It's clearer what the left is. It's some type of socialism that also changes along the lines. I don't know if Marx would be too enthusiastic about the trans movement, for example. But they definitely take some of his ideas. With the right, it has certainly in recent times shifted a lot, and I think the Trump movement is a big part of that. The lip service that conservatives in America used to pay to free markets pretty much went away when Trump came in, and um, along with Trump, who's a lifelong Democrat until he decided to run as a Republican, many people from the left seem to join this new type of right, and unfortunately have stuck around. One of those people is Glenn Greenwald, former writer, journalist who has written for Salon, for The Guardian, for all sorts of interesting publications. He is critical of Israel, let's call it that. That's being generous. And he is unsurprisingly a fan of Tulsi Gabbard, the Democrat appointed by Trump as national intelligence advisor. Um, Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by Alex. Alex, any initial thoughts on Tulsi, on Glenn Greenwald's defense of her, before we go to some clips of him from recent days?
Well, I find it very interesting because Glenn Greenwald was actually the one of the journalists who broke the Edward Snowden story with Edward Snowden in Hong Kong. I keenly remember. I think that was from the movie Citizen 4 or Citizen something, where, if anybody remembers, Edward Snowden was, of course, responsible for one of the biggest national security breaches of all time. He worked for a subcontractor of NSA called Booz Allen, and he decided just to, exfiltrate a whole bunch of data and take it to Hong Kong. And Glenn Greenwald is, of course, the person who broke it. So I find it quite troubling that Glenn Greenwald, who, obviously supports leaking classified information to everybody, would be on the same page as Tulsi Gabbard. And I think that really is because the right and the left of recent time, they have this very anti-establishment kind of undercurrent. And I'm a person who thinks definitely you have to be critical of unearned authority, and resist tyranny of all kinds. But it's this sort of it's a very it's a very unintelligent, I think, analysis that she has, and also Glenn Greenwald has. But I don't really hold Glenn Greenwald to high standards. He is a journalist. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be the head of, national security or national intelligence, which I find astounding, really.
Yeah, and where people like Glenn Greenwald fight tyranny, seemingly is only at home. They have no issue with it abroad. Yeah, we're gonna play some clips. As always, if you're watching this later and you don't see those clips, we got a copyright claim. We cut them out. They will appear when we post this on X, and the links to the full videos are in the description. In this first clip from a video he did reacting to Elizabeth Warren's comments on Tulsi Gabbard, um, he pretty much tells us a lot about what he thinks about the role that she's going to have. Let's roll that clip.
Choices that we covered that I think is quite positive was the choice of Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, in part because that is such a important job when it comes to actually undermining and dismantling the most rotted, fundamentally corrupted parts of the U.S. security state. And although there are parts of Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy...
That's basically it. So this guy thinks that the role of the person in charge of national intelligence is to go after parts of the U.S. government. Now, there can be problematic areas there, but no, America has enemies that are really genuinely tyrannical and want to see all of us live in the kind of world that Glenn Greenwald, even being the journalist that he is, I don't think fully understands what that world will look like. That's why you need somebody in charge of national intelligence, and the scary thing is she probably agrees with him. Alex.
Yeah, well, I imagine so. She, kind of very famously said that America shouldn't try to topple the Assad regime. And she kind of gave this very, I would say, wishy-washy answer to that, where she said, well, if we get rid of the Assad regime, it's going to, empower ISIS. And she said we need to have an alliance with Russia against ISIS in Syria, and keep Assad in power. And Assad, remember, he had a nuclear weapons facility that Israel managed to bomb in 2007. Okay, this is a very bad guy. And in actual fact, she was completely wrong. Her premise was completely wrong, because the alliance with Russia, what it did was it brought Hezbollah into Syria, where they trained as phenomenal fighters, basically. And it also brought the Russians back into the Middle East on a physical level, which is also proven to be a massive strategic error in every way. And she also said that, we'll get into more of what she said, but that's basically what I have to say about that.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that those who are sympathetic to and apologetic for some of America's dictatorial enemies, even if they're not currently in a state of war, enemies like Russia, like Assad, are not fond of America's genuine allies like Israel, or countries that genuinely America should support because of who they're at war with, countries like Ukraine. Yeah, if we want to, let me just thank Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Later on in this same clip, he shows a clip of John Bolton, and his commentary on it is interesting. I've said, John Bolton is, I think, of prominent people in U.S. politics, my favorite, like the person I would want to see president. I don't think that's going to happen, but to me, somebody who is so anti-Bolton, it says a lot about him. Let's roll this clip.
John Bolton was considered such an extremist, such a warmongering sociopath, that even during the first Bush term, or the beginning of the second Bush term in the war on terror, when Bush and Cheney were getting everything they wanted, Bush tried to make John Bolton the ambassador to the UN. And the Senate, which was, again, afraid to challenge Bush, especially on national security, was giving him anything he wanted, declared John Bolton over the line. They twice rejected that nomination, and Bolton couldn't get confirmed. And now, just 20 years later, the wise statesman to whom we're all supposed to listen about foreign policy is the very same John Bolton who appeared both on CNN and MSNBC today to opine on the propriety of Trump's choices. Here's what he said on CNN.
Tulsi Gabbard, what are your thoughts this morning?
Well, I thought it was the worst cabinet-level appointment in history until they then heard about the Matt Gaetz appointment. Really, my reaction was that this is like the legend of Caligula, the Roman emperor, who wanted to nominate his horse as a Roman consul. You had to be a Roman senator at the time to be a consul, and it was intended to show how demeaned and degraded the Roman Senate had become. So now we're going to see whether the American Senate can stand up and reject two people who are totally unqualified, unfit professionally, and really lacking in the moral characteristics, the character that you need to hold these jobs. I think this vote should be 100-0 against both of them.
I mean, speaking for myself, if I would have to pick between John Bolton and Tulsi Gabbard running the intelligence apparatus or U.S. foreign policy, I would pick Tulsi Gabbard without giving it the slightest thought.
All right.
There is nothing.
Okay. Well, this is where Glenn Greenwald and I agree, because the only way I would pick Tulsi Gabbard over John Bolton is without giving it the slightest thought. But Glenn, thinking is good. It's good for you. Try it out. Yeah. What did he say? Bolton was such an extremist, warmonger, such a warmongering sociopath. John Bolton was one of the people who thought 9/11 should have been a wake-up call. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough of a wake-up call, but that was him being the warmonger. America waking up one day to see that savages hijacked planes, flew them into buildings, and declared war on America. And he basically said, you know what? Let's defend ourselves. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. That is extremism for what apparently is the new right. Alex.
Yeah, it also really reminds me of the Leonard Peikoff being on Bill O'Reilly, where Bill O'Reilly is like, well, we can't just go after them because then children will die. And Leonard Peikoff is like, are you underestimating the people who drove planes into the World Trade Center? If that's not going to be a wake-up call, then nothing will. And Bill O'Reilly is kind of making these like, well, it's going to be bad, and war and da da da. It's sort of like, well, I really wish that. Glenn Greenwald is of course lost, right? I don't think he really can be saved here. But I'm going to recommend to everybody Nothing Less Than Victory by John David Lewis. If you ever want to understand why defeating your enemies is an extremely important thing to do, and by defeating, we mean victory. We mean forcing them into a situation where they have to acknowledge their defeat. And you have to have the strength and the conviction of what's right and wrong. And I'm also very sympathetic sometimes to the very sort of realpolitik analysis, right? The kind of the way of thinking. But Tulsi Gabbard to me is a person who is completely devoid of any kind of moral strength to understand what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. It's all sort of different shades of authoritarianism, and the best one I think as well is when which is classic Russian disinformation and classic Chinese disinformation, when we're confronted with something horrific, right, that one of these authoritarian governments do. And sort of they always come back with, yeah, but we do bad stuff as well. Yeah, but America, we're not perfect. Yeah, but the West, we've done this and that and this. It's all, different shades of moral relativism and different shades of altruism. It's unbelievably unappealing.
Yeah, and you have to imagine, and we all often compare the situation to World War II, which was the last war that the West actually fought with the intention of winning. And imagine a Glenn Greenwald after Pearl Harbor. What would he have said? The attack happened, like 9/11.
Yeah.
That was it. Let's move on.
We deserved it. Yeah, that was the big one
yeah.
as well. It was always like kind of, oh, we deserved it because we are, meddling too much in the Middle East. And especially as well with this kind of resurgence of the Bin Laden, letter, kind of explaining, all of the bad ways America is horrendous. and all of the ways that they deserve 9/11 and worse. And people are, the kind of Glenn Greenwalds of the world, and the people that he inspires, and the people who are inspired by him, they always kind of go, yeah, well, we are bad. It's bad what we do. It's terrible what we do. It's to be honest, I even Tulsi Gabbard was, she classically said that the killing of Qasem Soleimani constituted a war crime, and it was extrajudicial killing. So what is Tulsi Gabbard trying to say? Should we have brought Qasem Soleimani, the mass, murderer, back to America to stand trial like he's a burglar, right? Like he's, like he's a guy who groped a woman on the subway. Is that how we should be trying? Even besides Osama bin Laden, why don't we try him? Why don't we try him as if he's a car burglar?
Yeah, and of course, the idea that we should do that does involve sending soldiers to an unnecessary death, but yeah, that's beside the point for them, and that's back to the World War II example. In World War II, when you look at what was done against Germany and against Japan, there was an understanding that you don't just have to damage the military of the other side to the point where they can't continue fighting. You have to make the population realize that the culture that made that kind of war possible needs to be a thing of the past. And this has not been done with the response to 9/11 in Afghanistan or in Iraq. And it hasn't been done, of course, by Israel, and it isn't being done with Russia. So yeah, unfortunately, those views of the Tulsi Gabbards and the Glenn Greenwalds of the world are more mainstream than actually saying, okay, sometimes we have to go to war and then let's win it. Somebody in the chat says the war machine has become a for-profit corporation, and that's very representative, I think, of these kind of views who seem to completely ignore the fact that there are people who would love to die as long as they can kill us, in the process.
I mean, what's even the point here? I mean, why spend the $200 on a handgun so that you can potentially defend yourself from somebody who breaks into your house and attacks you? Why? It's a waste of money. You're giving money to the war machine. No, you have to have an honest assessment of reality. Look at the world. Look at the way that there's obviously an alignment against the United States. So, what I'm not really. I'd love to understand exactly how Tulsi Gabbard would overcome that, and this sort of argument that the Glenn Greenwalds of the world tend to do is all about the innocent people in enemy territory. And I really think it's a very important article to read on Kargati's How to Think About Innocence in War. When you are when you have been attacked and you are defeating, your enemy, you have to look at every citizen there as if they are part of the enemy. Otherwise, there's no way for you to actually legitimately and defend yourself. And it's whether they're giving moral support, financial support to the dictatorial regime, you have to treat them as if they're part. This whole thing. Well, there's going to be we can't defend ourselves because these dictatorial fascist regimes don't care about their civilians. And lots of civilians will die. Okay, so then lots of civilians in America will die. That's another classic line from Leonard Beikoff's interview with Bill O'Reilly. He says, so, okay, the trade-off is that. The trade-off is going to be you're going to see innocent women and children. I hate kind of saying women and children as if women are devoid of any responsibility, but innocents. You're going to see innocents in America dying rather than innocents, so-called innocents in enemy territory.
Yeah, and even when it's not innocents, two Israeli soldiers died today in Jabalia. I don't know what the number is in the current operation, but it's high, and it's soldiers who don't have to die. If Israel said we would rather all the terrorists and so-called innocent civilians die on that side than a single soldier on our side. Not a single soldier would have died in this operation in Jabalia. So, yeah, so for somebody who says that we're establishment shills, somebody says in the chat, and then calls us fake libertarians. Well, we're not any kinds of
We're not
libertarians.
libertarians, so that's okay.
But
We're not gonna,
but
we accept that.
establishment shills, like, we're criticizing everything about how the this war is being fought.
What establishment? I mean, I spend basically most of my time criticizing the intelligence apparatus in Israel. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm the most critical of. So to say, establishment shells, I find that it's a little bit ridiculous if you're listening to the words that are coming out of mine and Razi's mouths.
Yeah, and the person who says this channel may be watching us for the first time. By the way, we obviously our strong policy is to never read the names of trolls in the chat, but this guy's using the name of somebody who I guarantee you would not agree with him. But anyway, thank you, Gail, for the super chat. Gail says, Alex, 100% read nothing less than victory. And another book that I think people should consider reading is Money Creation and Its Consequences, A Black Hole in Economics. Let me read from that blurb of the book. Get ready to challenge your long-held beliefs as we plunge into the enigmatic world of money creation, a true black hole in economic knowledge. Whether you're an investor maneuvering through volatile markets, a curious student hungry for clarity, or a savvy voter keen to stay in the loop, your role in understanding money creation is crucial. This book is tailored for you because your understanding matters. In this book, you'll discover surprising new insights about money, banks, and their powerful influence on your life. Most importantly, you'll discover strategies to effectively navigate the changing investment landscape and thrive during a protracted period of financial repression. This book by Jim Brown, who many of you have seen on this channel and will continue to see. We highly recommend it. And all royalties from that book go to the Ayn Rand Center UK, so that money will also go towards a good cause. The link is in the chat and in the description. Thank you, Roland, for the super chat. Roland says, financing the establishment shills. On behalf of the establishment, we thank you. All right. Let's go to another clip from a different video, which he did criticizing Bari Weiss for things she said about Tulsi Gabbard in 2019 on Joe Rogan's show.
And here's what Bari Weiss said about Tulsi Gabbard and what happened as a result.
Kirsten
Tulsi
Gillibrand. Oh, monstrous.
Monstrous?
Ideas.
Well, when she was 22, she had...
No, she's an Assad toady.
What does that mean?
She is
What's a toady?
I think that I used that word correctly. Jamie, can you check what toady means?
Like toeing the line? Is that what it means?
No, I think it's like a... Toadie.
What does that mean?
I think it means what I think it means.
There you go. So just to be clear, so far when Tulsi Gabbard came up, Bari Weiss said, "What? She's awful. She's a Assad toady." And then Joe Rogan said, "What do you mean? What does that mean, an Assad toady?" And Bari Weiss has no idea what she even meant, so she's trying to get a dictionary definition.
Toady. Definition of toadies. A person who
sycophant,
flatters or defers to others
I
for
kinda used it right.
self-serving reasons.
A sycophant.
So she's an Assad sycophant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's known about her.
Like, what did she say?
That's known about her. You don't even need to give a reason. You don't have to provide any evidence for that accusation. It's just known. Everybody knows. You listen to CNN, you listen to MSNBC, read the New York Times. Everybody knows Tulsi Gabbard's a toady of Assad. I don't even know what that means, but everyone says it. And if you ask me why, how I know it's true, I'm just going to say, like, it's known. What do you mean? Why? What, do I have to give evidence? Everybody knows that.
That
we have to look.
Like, what did she say that,
We have to look.
her?
I don't remember the details. I've read
probably
it.
should say that before we say that about her. We should probably read it, rather.
Well, I have read it.
So, do you see that what's happening here? This is what happens with all of these people. First he said, what do you mean by an Assad toady? She had no idea what she even meant. She just was repeating what she was always said. And then when she said, well, it's known, he said, well, what did she do that justifies that accusation, that very serious accusation? And she said, I don't remember. I don't know. I don't know. And Joe Rogan said, well, before we accuse her of that, we probably ought to know. She just got exposed completely. And it's not just Bari Weiss. This is how they all are. They have no idea why they call people Russian assets. They could never, if they were forced to.
So yeah, let's pause here. I think there's maybe a bit more there that would be interesting. But yeah, this is how they all are. They don't know. So first of all, you know, everybody has an off day from time to time. I think you know, to find one that Bari Weiss had, apparently you need to go back about 6 years. It's no doubt that Glenn Greenwald is not a fan of Bari Weiss, but she used the word. She wasn't 100% sure she used it correctly. Turns out she did use it correctly. Tulsi Gabbard is absolutely an Assad sycophant. And you know, she has said, we're going to see later what she said about Assad. But yeah, it's interesting that this clip is from like a couple of days, the Glenn Greenwald clip, where he goes back 6 years to find Bari Weiss in not her best day.
Well, I mean, I think that the theme that underpins everything that he says is anything America does is bad. And that then therefore it's basically it's okay. It's and the whole thing about Bari Weiss, I think that I'm not sure if sycophant is the right idea, because I watched an interview with Tulsi Gabbard where she gives almost like this extremely simplistic view of things, that you know, Assad actually is really not that bad, and that she then famously said, "Since when did we give up on diplomacy?" Well, I'd love to understand how exactly can you have diplomacy with Bashar al-Assad, the Ba'athist, the pan-Arab nationalist who was developing nuclear weapons, who had chemical weapons factories. How do you have diplomacy with that? What is that? You sit down, you have coffee, you kind of say, okay, listen, you know, we're for freedom and liberty, and you're for Baathism. You're Bashar al-Assad. So it's, you know, we're just kind of two different systems, but we're basically the same. I think that it is moral sanctioning to go down this kind of line. And there's certainly a lot of interesting debates to be had around when it is a good idea to support those who are trying to overthrow a regime, and when it's not. There certainly is an interesting discussion to go around. But like I said, Tulsi Gabbard's her solution to this whole thing was we should have an alliance with Russia in Syria to keep Bashar al-Assad in power, so that we can, you know, defeat ISIS. Well, if that's your solution, I mean, just look at the results. Look at the results of your solution. Now you don't have freedom of operation in Iraq. You now have Bashar al-Assad and Putin, you know, kind of deciding if American planes can, you know, fly in the area. So that's really been a very positive outcome. And of course, the free flow of weapons coming from Iran all the way into Syria, and the empowerment of Hezbollah. So it's really, you know, fantastic outcome. Well done, Tulsi Gabbard.
Now we have a clip that we're going to play from later in this video, which is on this topic, but I think there was something else I wanted to comment on. So Daniel, if you can continue from where we were, and yeah.
Justify it, do so, but they're never asked to, because in these closed information circles in which they reside, they're never challenged. It's just assumed that you're allowed to make that accusation. Here's the rest of this.
We have to look. I don't remember the details. I've read
probably should say that before we say that about her. We should probably read it rather.
Well, I have read it.
No, I mean, we should right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just so we know what she said.
Look up
I've had her
Tulsi
on here
Gabbard.
before,
Look
and I
up
really
Tul-
enjoyed talking to her. I like her a lot.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I like talking to her.
Okay,
I like
okay.
talking to her. I don't know about.
I think she's like the mother lode of bad ideas.
Whoa.
I'm pretty positive about that, especially on Assad, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong.
Well, my take on her was that I think as a person who's coming from the left, who's also a veteran and is very articulate and sensible and a woman, and in talking to her, we didn't get into Assad or any of those things, but talking to her about what she feels is wrong with the current administration and the way things are running and a direction she thinks things could go in, she has some very promising ideas. I didn't know about this.
But doesn't she also, did she ever apologize for believing in conversion therapy?
I didn't even know she believed it.
Do you see what Bari Weiss just did? She got completely exposed, having no answer whatsoever to Joe Rogan's question on what basis to accuse her of being this. She's like, I don't remember, I read it somewhere. And then the more Joe Rogan said, well, I actually like Tulsi Gabbard, more and more nervous. She just thought Joe Rogan would automatically agree with her, whereas in Bari Weiss's world, this is just assumed. This is how liberal discourse works. It absolutely is. And by liberal discourse, I mean establishment.
Okay, yeah.
Discourse,
By liberal discourse, you mean anybody who disagrees with me, I count them as liberal. Yeah, it's interesting. Bari Weiss on a bad day is way better than Glenn Greenwald on his best day. And Joe Rogan's pushback there is, I interviewed her and I like her, because she's a veteran. First of all, thank you, Tulsi, for your service, but that does not mean we have to agree with everything you say and do for the rest of time. What else was I going to say on that? I don't want Glenn Greenwald to say that I don't know what I'm saying because I lost my train of thought. So, Alex, I'm going to go to you and come back.
I find it very troubling that the sort of distortion of facts that kind of surrounds I would say, there were genuine legitimate criticisms, I would say, of invasion of privacy, for example, in the Patriot Act. And those kind of legitimate criticisms and legitimate investigations kind of got lost when people like Glenn Greenwald just decided to assist Edward Snowden with leaking all of this extremely classified information, and also the kind of the elevation of someone like WikiLeaks. What was his name? Julian Assange. Julian Assange coaxed people in the intelligence community into revealing information that exposed agents that got people killed. And I don't know, it's kind of this sort of theme that kind of runs through the right and the left, which is whatever the establishment is, the so-called establishment supports, I'm for the opposite, right? Doesn't matter what that is. If the establishment thinks that it's wrong, for example, for Russia to invade Ukraine, then therefore, I'm maybe seeing it from the other direction. So I hate this ideology, which is a reaction to another ideology. It's basically nothing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and again, you see there with Joe Rogan, he doesn't anything that is pointed out by Bari Weiss about Tulsi Gabbard's ideas, he doesn't actually know. I don't know what kind of chat they had. Maybe he was smoking one blunt too many during that particular episode. I don't know what happened, but yeah, it's fine to criticize people who Joe Rogan likes as a person for ideas they express. Now, the conversion therapy point is perfectly legitimate when somebody wants to be president. Now, she did apologize for that, but it's not irrelevant. Thank you. I don't know if I already thanked you, but thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Enric, for the super chat. Enric says, further financing the shills for reason. Thank you. The deep state just got deeper. Okay, let's watch some more from later on in this video.
Here's the Washington Post in 2024. Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Buttigieg, MSNBC. Rather, this is 2019. Oh, actually, here's the debate between Pete Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard when they were both running for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020, when Tulsi was still a Democrat, and Pete Buttigieg raised this issue of her having met with Assad.
And if your question is about experience, let's also talk about judgment. One of the foreign leaders you mentioned meeting was Bashar al-Assad. I have, in my experience, such as it is, whether you think it counts or not, since it wasn't accumulated in Washington, enough judgment that I would not have sat down with a murderous dictator like that.
Congresswoman Gabbard, let me allow you to respond.
Thank you. You were asked directly whether you would send our troops to Mexico to fight cartels, and your answer was yes. The fact checkers can check this out. No. But your point about judgment is absolutely correct. Our commander-in-chief does need to have good judgment. And what you've just pointed out is that you would lack the courage to meet with both adversaries and friends to ensure the peace and national security of our nation. I take the example of those leaders who have come before us, leaders like JFK, who met with Khrushchev, like Roosevelt, who met with Stalin,
like Donald Trump,
Reagan, who met and worked with Gorbachev. These issues of national security are incredibly important. I will meet with and do what is necessary to make sure that no more of our brothers and sisters in uniform are needlessly sent into harm's way fighting regime change.
Let's pause here, even though the point was Glenn Greenwald's commentary on this. We'll get to that. But yeah, there's something there. And the way she says it, by the way, I know people don't like Pete Buttigieg, and I don't like his ideas either, but he is real life successful, which is rare among people who run in the Democratic Party. Also, notice how the audience of the Democratic debate is so triggered by everything. They're like shocked by any statement that's made. The one statement they should be shocked by is when she says, she talks about having the courage to meet both adversaries and friends. That's not adversaries. That's enemies. This is somebody who, supported terrorists, wants to get rid of Israel, has gassed his own people. That's an enemy. Alex.
Well, I'm going to, I don't want to be accused of not having all the facts. So I'll just read a quote that Tulsi Gabbard said about Bashar al-Assad. Quote, Assad is not an enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States. Well, interesting. I mean, why? So building, nuclear weapons in secret, and having that nuclear plant exposed in 2006, and also destroyed and bombed by Israel, of course, because America would never do anything as bold as that. Hasn't done anything as bold as that in a very long time. Okay, well, I'd be interested in understanding who is an enemy then of the United States. If Bashar al-Assad is not considered an enemy, if they're, building nuclear weapons and gassing their people and in alliance with Russia and in alliance with Hezbollah. Hezbollah have killed hundreds of Americans. And if the keeping Bashar al-Assad in power was only possible because of the alliance with Hezbollah and Russia. Hezbollah have an enormous amount of American blood on their hands, and read all of their manifestos. Take a look at the things that they do. So if this is not an adversary or an enemy, then who on earth is?
Yeah, by the way, that strike by Israel on Syria's nuclear weapons program, Ehud Olmert was prime minister at the time, and he told a story of a conversation that he had with then President Bush. For people who think Republicans are, God's gift to Israel, Bush said, I can't support you on this, but basically, kind of said, I'm not going to do anything about it, but I'm against it, which is certainly better than what we can assume Obama, Biden, Harris would have done, which is you do this and you're never getting any weapons ever again, or something to that effect. But still, not good enough. But there's okay. We'll get to questions about how this
And it
is
was done
going
at the 11th hour. I just want to say as well, it was literally the 11th hour for the and the same thing happened as well with Iraq. These happened at the 11th hour, at the very, very, very end of when it would be possible. Literally moments before Bashar al-Assad in Syria would have gone nuclear. And not only that, let's think about what happened after that. This all fell into the hands of Hezbollah and ISIS. So, I mean, the world really should be thanking Israel for that particular strike that was magnificently done, I have to say. And I have nothing good to say about Ehud Olmert, but it was really his proudest moment, I would say.
I completely agree. And yeah, this is one of several moments in history that the world should thank Israel for and doesn't. So you mentioned the strike in Iraq. Yeah, Saddam Hussein would have had a nuclear bomb had it not been for Israel. But the response was a UN Security Council resolution. We talk about how even under Democrats, almost every resolution against Israel is vetoed. At the time, the U.S. under Reagan and Britain under Thatcher voted for the resolution condemning Israel. I believe Britain or Thatcher said something to the effect of Iraq has the right to respond. So yeah, Israel does things that sometimes are acknowledged decades later, sometimes are not, and in many cases, should be celebrated. Gail says in the chat, would Tulsi meet with a serial killer to discuss his reform? Good question, and you would assume the answer should be yes if she's consistent. I sometimes just want to read the comments from the trolls because they have such a high opinion of us. So this troll says, Tulsi seems to be a level-headed adult. For millennia, actual adults have convened and negotiated with their sworn enemies until Rosie Ginsburg came along to change the rules. Yes, nobody has ever supported a strong national security policy until me. But yeah, I don't know. She doesn't call him sworn enemy. She calls him adversary, or suggests that he is an adversary. All right, should we continue this clip and then see what Glenn Greenwald has to say on this?
Wars that undermine our national security. I'll bring real leadership and experience to the White House.
I mean, this is so pathetic that in Democratic Party politics now, meeting with a bad person that you think is a bad foreign leader is somehow evidence that you're in bed with them. The most significant foreign policy actions of the last 50 years came when presidents met with who we consider to be the world's worst, most savage dictators. Tulsi mentioned when JFK met with Khrushchev at the height of the Cold War, when the United States had been involved in a Cold War, arguing that the Soviet Union was the evil empire, as Ronald Reagan put it. Nixon went to China, a country that he had been warning was a grave danger and a repressive, brutal regime for years, and then went there and opened relations there and met with the Chinese leaders and created arms agreements. Ronald Reagan did the same when it came to Soviet leaders, even before they collapsed in his first term, negotiating all sorts of arms deals. The idea that if you go and meet a foreign leader, even who's an adversary, it means somehow you're in their pocket or you're cozying up to them, is disgusting. The reason Tulsi Gabbard went to Syria was because she was opposed to the dirty war that Obama had unleashed, spending $1 billion a year, having the U.S. fight alongside al-Qaeda and ISIS in trying to remove Bashar al-Assad and destroying that country. And Tulsi Gabbard's view is, why are we in Syria?
Right.
Why are we trying to fight?
Okay, again, there's going to be a link in the description. You can hear more of that bullshit if you want. But yeah, the only reason she went there is to defend him from the evil Americans. Obama, by the way, these people are to the left of Obama, the new right. Obama went there and destroyed their country. Remember, Obama had a red line, and that was crossed, and he didn't do anything about it. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't use Obama as an example of somebody who did what I would say would be good and what Tulsi would say is bad. But it just shows you where these people are on the political spectrum when it comes to foreign policy and national security.
What he's saying is not even actually true. It was the empowerment of the Free Syrian Army and the other united international allied forces in Syria. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of mistakes that were made in Syria. There was a lot of moral sanction given to some extremely bad people. But kind of Glenn Greenwald's assumption is just like, well, it was wrong because we were there and we shouldn't have been there. And if we wouldn't have been there, everything just would have been fine. And it's this sort of, I'm not really sure what they think. Do they think that if America just, didn't intervene in anything, then no enemy would ever challenge them, then nothing bad would ever happen? I'm not, and also, the world doesn't really understand how much they benefit from America basically being the maritime enforcer of the world. I'm not really sure what Glenn Greenwald would say when half of Europe and the Middle East would basically be in complete darkness because the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about them. I mean, it's frivolous, it's stupid, it's without any kind of moral conviction, it's without any kind of basic understanding of the principles of defeating enemies, of not giving them moral sanction. I'm not, is the argument that Bashar al-Assad was a positive force because ISIS was such a bad force? I mean, is the only possibility you have two bad outcomes? I'm so fed up with this line of thinking, this fuzzy, pathetic, moralless, convictionless way of thinking.
I agree. Thank you, Bullmoose, for the super chat. Bullmoose says, believe it or not, Operation Opera was actually coordinated between Israel and Iran, the same regime it has now. Operation Opera was getting rid of the Iraqi nuclear facilities. Alex, is that true?
I don't know about that. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it sounds far-fetched. Iran was at war with Iraq, but it basically declared war on the existence of Israel in a sense as soon as the regime came to power. Yeah.
Yeah, but also I also just want to say, like, Iran has also been very involved in everything that's been going on in Iraq and also in Syria. And that was kind of a way that they used to develop their Shiite forces in the region, and also the ones in Iraq. Yeah, so just because they're interested in defeating ISIS doesn't mean you should morally sanction or support the Shia militias, which is it's totally ravaged the entire area. And yeah, the presence of the United States is definitely felt. The lack of presence actually has definitely been felt.
Yeah, and look, if Tulsi is supporting Assad because he's against ISIS, this is the mistake that America has been making in especially the Middle East for too long. You see bad guys, you support whoever's fighting against them, not realizing, although should have realized a long time ago, it is possible for bad guys to hate other bad guys and fight each other. Somebody says Iran officially condemned it, Operation Opera. Well, that's not proof that they weren't helping. That is, that's kind of how international relations work. You do something and then you condemn it. Anyway, Tulsi being in the basically in Trump's government, how is that going to work with some of the other people there? I mean, we've said we expect to have on the channel what we've had in the last few days, which is some praise for some of Trump appointments, and then the next day, shocking, dismay at the people he's appointing. But yeah, those people are going to have to sit together and work together in some cases on the same issues. How's that going to work, Alex?
Well, I mean, kind of the conservative estimate for what the United States has to do in terms of building its industrial base and military base so that it's prepared for the kind of the next for 2027, right? That's the deadline for China invading Taiwan. So they're saying that they have to actually quadruple their current forces and quadruple their current ability to create basic things like tank shells, create basic things like munitions. So I wonder, with Tulsi's opinion, that you have to kind of not intervene in anything and kind of have a smaller military. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. Potentially, reality is going to hit her. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't think it is going to work. At some points, I kind of feel like there's this kind of quiet nod to the woke right, kind of the Tucker Carlsons of the world. Tucker Carlson has a very strong opinion of Mike Pompeo. Oddly enough, Russia and China also have a very low opinion of him, and he's constantly being spoken about on their state media. So I think Trump also kind of gives a nod to the woke right, and at the same time kind of gives a nod to the more I would say clear thinking individuals. I think it's going to be a real mess. I think it's going to be a real disaster. But at the same time, I really do hope that Tulsi Gabbard is extremely successful. I want her to have a moral awakening. I want her to have an ideological conversion, and to be a strong advocate and to be successful in her in her position if indeed she is appointed.
Well, I'm going to be the pessimist and say that's probably not going to happen. And what I'm afraid of, at least based on the previous Trump administration, is people don't last long in their roles because of whatever reasons. And there's going to be war of sorts internally in the cabinet. And I hope the good guys win, but I'm afraid of what the world will look like if the bad guys win, which is why I think Israel January 20th should start doing what they need to do as quickly as possible in case by the end of the month, the good guys are gone. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that as well, I mean, I listened to an extremely chilling broadcast from the IDSF, the Habitronitz, where it was actually David Weinberg said that Israel needs to move into a war economy and needs to start thinking about, this took my breath away, has to start thinking about using the high school students and the senior citizens in factories to develop basic munitions. Kind of astounding. So if that is the reality that is facing us, I'm very concerned, and I hope that this entire experience from the last year has woken up the welfare queens basically in our senior leadership in the IDF. It's very clear that Israel has to become weapons independent in so much as it's possible, and have the kind of freedom to conduct a war in the best way possible with absolute victory.
And Bulmus shared an article with us that says that I haven't read it, but it says that Iran shared intelligence for the operation. According to that article, we'll put that for reference in the description. Yeah, we are way out of time, but it was fun. I think Glenn Greenwald,
because we had such a great discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Glenn Greenwald will probably earn some more episodes dedicated to him in the future. Thank you, Jeff, for the last minute super chat. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will be back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. We'll see you then.